Friday. We made it to yet the end of another week. And before you know it, it's going to be the end of April, and we're going to be getting close to the end of the semester. So I've got everything that you sent me. I got that all graded and returned to you. My plan for today is to go over some of the homework. My plan today is to give you a short in-class quiz, which part of it is copied from your homework. And then after that, I plan to discuss just some exceptional uses, some slightly different uses of augmented six chords. And if you are paying attention to your assignment sheet, you will know that we are getting closer to our first test. In fact, I believe the first test is a week from today. So on Monday, we're going to finish up talking about augmented six chords. On Wednesday next week, I plan to review for the test. And then Friday, we'll actually have the first test. Another thing about next Friday, I don't know if it affects you at all. Maybe you've heard this in some of your other classes. But next Friday is one of the music department's 2 scholarship audition days. Have you been told this in other your classes?
Yes.
Which means we may have some high schoolers, high school seniors here next Friday. So they may be milling around. I don't know how many will come. Depends on what kind of weather we have. Depends on if they want to, come here with masks and travel here even despite COVID and all that kind of stuff. So that's coming up as well. Before I address the homework, I would like to go over one chord progression that has a few chords missing. And I would like you to use your, what you've learned last class, your common sense too, and I would like you to help me fill in the blanks as to what Roman numeral I should put in these two blanks. So let's say I'm in the key of G major, and I've got the end of a chord progression, blank, German 6, blank, 5, and 1. Based on what we've talked about yesterday, who can give me a chord for one of those blanks?
4, 6 with purple.
Okay, thank you. Then we talked about how a chord that is built that has lay or la in the bass is generally a really good chord to precede an augmented 6 chord with. And I said out of all those chords with la or lay in the bass that you had on that in-class handout, I said just try to remember one, and that's 4, 6. So what should I do, minor 4, 6 or major 4, 6 based on major 4, 6? That's right. Good. And who can give me the Roman numeral that must go in the other blank?
164.
Yeah, very good. German 6 has to go to 164 before going to 5, otherwise parallel fifths result if it goes directly to 5. And since I'm in a major key, I'll go to capital 164. Yeah, that's a very good progression. All we need to do is probably start it with a 1 chord, and you've got a decent progression with some chromaticism in it. Okay, so I just wanted to double check that. Second thing I want to do is I would like to go over the chords that you had to spell in section C, numbers 6 through 10. I think that was workbook page 218. I would like to show those answers up on the screen once I find mine. Just numbers 6 through 10. I think I gave you numbers 1 through 5 on a prior handout. I think I just copied those in from the workbook, 1 through 5 on a prior assignment. Put them on a sheet for you. Again, kind of hard to see. I know it's very small. Number 6, the Italian 6 in F sharp minor. First of all, you need your key signatures. And then I would spell that as D, F sharp, and then B sharp. D, F sharp, B sharp. D is lay, F sharp is do in that key, and B sharp is Fi, the raised fourth scale degree. Number 7, the German 6th, We need F natural on the bottom, A, C natural, and then it looks like D sharp. And remember, to spell a German 6 correctly in a major key with a key signature, you need 3 accidentals, which is why I have 3 accidentals there. Number 8, C minor is the key. The French 6 from the bottom up is A flat, C, D, and F sharp. A flat, C, D, and F sharp. And the only accidental you need on that one is the F sharp for fee, because you're in a minor key. Number 9, not even an augmented 6 chord. How are you doing still with these secondary diminished chords? 7, fully diminished 7 of 6 in G major. The root of a 6 is E in this key, correct? So the leading tone to E, the root of the 7 chord, is going to have to be D sharp. Remember, it's always a half step, a minor second below for the leading tone. And then if you can spell a fully diminished 7th chord on D sharp, which is all stacked minor thirds, you should have D sharp, F sharp, A, C. What if, sometimes I wonder, and I don't know, I would probably be under too much pressure even if I were asked to do this, but what if like your entire course grade was based on you spelling one secondary leading tone chord? And if you got it wrong, you failed class. If you got it right, you passed. You'd be okay with that? I don't know, I think that's a lot of pressure. Even for me. Okay, finally, number 10. We have, it looks like another augmented 6 chord, this time in E minor. So we need lay in the bass, which is C, then E, then G, and then finally Fee, which is A sharp. So C, E, G, A sharp for that one. Questions about how to spell any of these? Why have accidentals on certain notes and not others? Just so you know, if you spell these chords with these pitches, but you just wrote them in a different octave, that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. I want you to be able to be pretty good at spelling these chords, just because I think, on the test, if you've got some spelling, it's a good way. I don't want to say it's an easy way, but it's a nice way to get a lot of points on the test. As long as you pay attention to the details and remember your accidentals, you can really get a lot of points off the test right off the bat there. Okay, moving on then. Let me ask if there are any questions about E number, page 229, no, the part on the bottom of your handout. The part right. Let's skip the Schumann waltz for a moment. Does anyone have any questions about the note or how to voice or some of the part writing for that bottom section? Yes.
And going from the pickup to the last measure, I had like a really big drop in the tenor bass voices. I don't know if that's right.
Okay. It's from where to the last measure?
The 5 to the 1 at the end.
Okay.
I just had a really big drop. I didn't know like that was
Well,
loud.
I do definitely have a drop in the bass from the 5 to the 1.
Okay.
It's got to go down a fifth.
Okay.
And then I actually do have you can have a slight drop in between, because I have C sharp in the 5 chord, I have it in an inner voice.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I frustrated it down. You can take it up to D if you want, but I frustrated mine down. So I have a small leap of a third, so there's a drop there. Let me see if I can, maybe it'd be helpful if I actually wrote some of this up on the board. I think we're in the key of D major. And I voiced my 5 chord like this. And there's a whole note E that's still sounding through the bar right there. So that's in the soprano. So that's how I have my 5-chord voice in the key of D. And then to get a root position 1, the bass has to come to D. And I think the soprano, did I give you the soprano there, D? Yeah, okay. And then what I did in order to get a complete tonic triad, I ended up frustrating the leading tone, which is an inner voice, and bringing that note down.
Okay, I switched the two around, but I thought the A would stay where it's at.
Okay, I guess it could, then you'd have to take your C
Yeah.
sharp all the way up to an F sharp.
I took it down. Maybe that's right, that's
Well, no,
what
you
it is.
can't take it down to an F sharp, because then your A, your alto would be more than an octave away from your tenor F sharp. And that's bad spacing, poor spacing. Yeah, so usually, I mean, unless I inadvertently make a mistake, usually there's a method for my a reason for my madness in my part writing, because I know I can't do something else, because that would be a violation of some guideline or some rule. Yeah, good question. Other questions about that section? You were aware, right, that those whole notes were holding in for the soprano voice for measures 1 and 2, so you didn't have to write anything in the soprano here. Okay. Well, we're about 15 minutes in. Now's a good time for me to give you the A-class quiz. So if you want to just keep your handout out, you'll be able to copy a portion of that, your answers there onto this quiz. The rest of it is just spelling chords. So be careful to make sure you pay attention to your accidentals. And in about 10 minutes, we'll move on. everyone's had enough time, so take a look. Thank you. Alright, so what I'd like to do first is show you the entire part rating example that you had at the bottom of your homework sheet. This is the one that was on the quiz. And that was to be right about here. Remember, I already showed you the part rating for the last two chords. Remember, one of the primary points that I tried to make yesterday in the last class was that when you part right out of an augmented sixth chord, you find the two notes, lay and fee, that form the augmented sixth interval, and you take fee up a half step, and you take lay down a half step, so they resolve outward to an octave on sol. And so that's why here in the 5 chord, as I showed you before, I have an A in the bass, and I have an A in the alto as well. Okay. Did you remember your accidentals for lay and fee in the French sixth chord? I suppose I should play that. I could play that for you, so you can hear what it sounds like. We're in D major. I think, at least for me, when I started learning more about these chromatic harmonies, I started getting a lot more excited about vocal lines that just move by like half step. It's really neat. You get just all these different little flavors and inflections of tones for each chord. It's really neat. All right, the last thing, for the homework that I do want to do is I want to show you the analysis for the Schumann example. So, by the way, did I put in the instructions that the whole passage was in A on it? Yeah. So no modulation. And is the first chord a one chord? No, not by a long shot. In fact, I hope you got, for the first chord, I hope you got a German sixth. German sixth. And then in measure 2, it goes to a 1-6-4, which as it should. And then the very last chord in measure 2 I have is a 5-7. I would also accept 5-6-5 or even 7 diminished, believe it or not, in root position. Why do I have a root position 5-7 at the end of measure 2? Does anyone know? Do you see this E here? And do you see the instructions mit pedal? That means, like when you listen to it especially too, the low E is sounding through the whole bar. Even though it's not notated that way, but the effect is that the low E gets sounded through the whole bar. If that's okay, like I said, if I would have graded this, I would accept 5-6-5, I would also accept 7 diminished. Okay? But this makes more sense to me once, whoops, where am I? 1-6-4 going to root position 5-7. All right, then in measure 3, I've got a 1 chord, measure 4, a 1-6 chord, measure 5, a 5-4-3, measure 6, a 1, measure 7, I got a 5 chord, and measure 8, I got a 5-7, with some passing tones right in the middle. of that measure. How are you doing? Any questions so far on the chords on the top system? Going to the second system, kind of a repetition of the beginning. We've got German 6, 164, 5, 7. We talked about that chord. Then in measure 11, I've got a 1 chord. Now, what do you have in measure 12? Did you get a Neapolitan 6? Good, because it's B flat, D, F. It's a major triad that's built on the lowered second degree of the scale of A minor. And D happens to be the lowest pitch there, so it's first inversion B flat chord. Now, this one is tricky, I think. In measure 13, I have that the root is omitted. There's no A on the first 2 beats of measure 13. But with E in the bass and C up above, that's really the only sensible logical harmony that really would go there after a Neapolitan 6, right? Because we know, we've talked about how a 164 potential 6/4 can get in between the N6 and its 5 that it goes to. And I would assume when we listen to this, and I'm going to try to sync up to the Wi-Fi system here so we can listen to it in a moment, I would assume that that's what the ear hears, even though there is no root to that chord, notated in that chord. Okay. Then we have a little deceptive progression. 5/7 goes to 6. And then the last bit is 164, 5/7, 1. Some points that I would like to make about the German 6, and then also about the Neapolitan 6. I don't know if you can, well, let me see if I can increase the size of this. You see how Schumann actually, in a strange way, he kind of follows proper voice leading by taking Phi, D sharp, which is in the tenor range here. He resolves it up by a half step as it should to sol. And you see the low lay down there in the bass, it resolves down by half step to sol. So in a way, Schumann is following good voice leading procedures here. So that's one positive I'll say about Schumann's voice leading. But when we get to the Neapolitan 6 chord, things start to go kerplooey in terms of voice leading. First of all, at the beginning of the measure, Schumann does have that lowered second scale degree raw. It's in the soprano, which is where I asked you to place yours always, right? But then on B3, he has a different note of the chord in the soprano. So he changes the voicing completely. He also goes to, well, I don't want to mess with that. I'll just say he's got it in first inversion, okay? A second thing that I don't like about the voice leading here is that Schumann's raw, this B flat, does it eventually go down to T? In other words, in the key of A minor, does it go down to G sharp? No, it doesn't really look like it does. In fact, it just leaps way up here, and then it starts doing some more stuff in the soprano melody. Okay? So it doesn't resolve down to T. Also, what if I always ask you to double when you spell an N6 in 4 voices? Does anyone remember? The bass, that's right, double the bass. Did Schumann double the bass here in his Neapolitan? No, he actually doubled raw. He's got B flat here and he's got B flat up above. And then of course he just totally omits the root of this chord. I don't know, probably on purpose, I would assume. But that's kind of strange. So I guess what I can say about this is that especially the second half of this waltz by Schumann, it's really not written entirely with a concern for 4-part chorale style part rating rules. But instrumental music often includes strange doublings due to extra voices. So I'm going to give him some leeway in a pass here because this is instrumental music. It's really not meant to be strictly 4-part chorale style writing. I mean, who am I who am I to, grade and mark Schumann and say, no, I don't know, your voicing looks a little lousy here, you get a D or something. No, that's not the right place to do it. So, all right, so you should have the music in front of you. If you give me a minute or so, I will connect to the Wi-Fi system here and see if the sound works so we can hear this passage. Because I do like you to hear what you analyze whenever possible.
As 22, 1, D, 1.
Then it repeats, of course. What do you think of, I don't know if I care for this recording. It almost sounds like the pianist is a little bit upset. I don't know, I can imagine it being a little bit softer, maybe a tad bit slower. We'll hear the repeat. Did you hear the Neapolitan? That raw, way down in the lower range. Okay, for what it's worth, there you go. Who would have thought that, just a few months ago that you'd be analyzing music now that contains Neapolitan chromatic harmonies and augmented sixth chromatic harmonies, this kind of thing. I think that's pretty cool. Look at how far you've come, right? Especially since Theory 1. Wow, those are the good old days. All right, to finish off this class, I want to make kind of two points about augmented sixth chords that I didn't have time to last class. Last class, I think it was Daniel that made a point about this, that when you spell a German sixth chord in a major key, we need to use an accidental to make May, to create scale degree May as part of that German sixth chord. But that when the German sixth chord resolves, as it should to a tonic 6/4, I think he made a point, you gotta be careful to make sure that you add an accidental to return that note and make it Me again. Does this sound familiar, sort of? So it is a little bit sneaky when you are part writing a German sixth chord in a major key. Yes, we've talked at length now about how to get you need an accidental on one of the pitches to make it May, the lowered third scale degree, even though you're in a major key. But then when you resolve it to a major tonic 6/4, you have to remember to cancel out that accidental that you made May and make it back, turn it back to Me, which is a little bit sneaky and hard to, if you're not really paying attention, it's easy to miss. Okay. Now, one thing regarding this this type of example is as follows. Let's see how I want to say this. Composers and musicians back in the day, when this first started coming about, they used to look at this and they say, I don't know if I visually like this. You see how we have a chromatically lowered pitch, and that chromatically lowered pitch is actually resolving or moving up. It's ascending. Okay. So, I guess I'm chromatically raised pitches resolving up, they actually look more reasonable than chromatically lower pitches resolving up. Because we expect raised notes to ascend and lowered ones to descend. In other words, in general, if we lower a pitch chromatically in a key, we tend to like to see it actually resolve or move down. And it's only when we've got a chromatically raised pitch, like this one up here, we like to see those resolve or move up. That's just pretty much normal motion, at least when you get into, theory and musician type of stuff. So I guess what composers did sometimes, they spelled the German six in a major key. They spelled may enharmonically. What's an enharmonic spelling of B flat? A sharp, okay, good. So what they did is they actually, sometimes in major keys, they spelled the German six like this, and they used, instead of may, they used the raised second scale degree, which is re. And why did they do this? They did this only to appease the eye, just for visual purposes. You see how now we've got a raised chromatic pitch in the key of G major, and that is actually resolving up. So it looks more normal. It looks more natural. It looks more reasonable. And I'm not telling you this because I want you to start spelling your German sixes in major keys enharmonically or differently. In fact, I don't want you to do that. I want you to continue to spell your German sixes the way you've always done it, whether you're in a major key or a minor key. That is lay, do, may, and fi. One of the reasons I point this out is because somewhere down the line, I forget if it's on a homework assignment or something or other, you may be asked to analyze a passage of music that has a German six, which is, one of the pitches is enharmonically spelled. And I don't want that to throw you. You might think, well, this is lay, and this is do, and that's fi. It looks like an augmented sixth chord of some kind, but I can't explain this. And really, if you think about one of the pitches enharmonically, yes, we can, right? Because the A sharp enharmonically is actually may. And when you think of it as may, then this makes sense as a German sixth chord. Let me go back to the enharmonic spelling. I used to, when I was, in case you care, when I was a teaching assistant as a PhD student, a doctoral student at the University of Kentucky, they taught spelling German sixth chords this way instead of the other way. And who can tell me technically, what is the interval between the bass lay and this pitch re? What kind of fourth is that?
Augmented fourth.
Okay, but isn't E flat up to A natural an augmented fourth? So E flat up to A sharp would have to be technically, isn't that one of those weird doubly augmented intervals? Right, because E flat up to A flat is a perfect fourth. So E flat up to A natural is an augmented fourth. E flat up to A sharp is then a doubly augmented fourth. And so there are some books, and I used to have to teach it this way at my school in Kentucky. There are some books that call the German augmented sixth spelled this way as a doubly augmented 4/3 chord. I'm not making this up. Because there's a doubly augmented fourth above the bass, and there's actually, there's a third above the bass. I know, to you it's probably like, that's gobbledygook, that's nonsense. But it's just the way you kind of look at it, I guess. All right, so we'll get rid of that. We'll put this back to the normal way. I think it's much easier just to remember the scale degrees you need to spell these augmented sixth chords. And for the German sixth, still I would like you to continue using lay, do, may, and fi as you always have. All right, the last thing I want to show you is a part rating example like this. Let's go to a different key, D minor. Excuse me. And where's my example? Let me show you how to resolve an augmented 6 chord to a 5/7. So far, we've been resolving augmented 6 chords either to 1/6/4 or to root position 5, a 5 triad. Okay? But I don't think we've done any to 5/7. So let me go ahead and spell let's just take, for example, a French 6th in the key of D minor. And sorry, get down. Just to verify that I've spelled this chord right, the French 6 contain. I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong key. I'm copying my notes wrong. My bad, we're in A minor. That makes more sense. So the bass is lay in A minor. There's do, there's re, and here's fi. Right? Those are the 4 notes of a French 6. So in A minor, I've got a French 6. Now, to normally resolve this French 6 to a 5, we find lay and fi, and we resolve those pitches outward in opposite direction by a half step, and we would end up with a 5 chord that looks like this, which, no problem at all. Right? But, if we want to go instead of a 5 to a 5 triad, if we want to go instead to a 5/7, this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to take fi, and instead of resolving it up a half step to sol, we're actually going to have it slide down a half step, like this, so that we can get a 7th in our 7th chord. So when you resolve like an Italian 6 or a French 6 to a 5/7 instead of 5, fi actually moves down, slides down by half step to produce the 7th of the 5/7 chord. And when this happens, fi, the raised 4th scale degree, is generally tucked away and placed in an inner voice, so it's not that noticeable. It's not that audible. Let me go out to the piano and play. I'll play French 6 to 5 as normal, and then I'll play French 6 to 5/7, and see if you like. See what you think of the sound of that progression. Okay, so we're in A minor. We've got our French 6, and that would normally go to 5, which we've done last class. But this is a French 6 going to 5/7. Do you hear in the alto this? So let me do that again. Actually, it doesn't sound bad to my ears. It's because it's in an inner voice, and instead of taking the raised 4th scale degree up, I'm just sliding it down a half step. And then slide it down another step if you want to get it. And again, there's one of those stepwise, partly chromatic lines that sound so juicy. Whether you play them or whether you sing them. So this is just a special case when augmented 6 goes to 5/7. Please do not take German 6s to 5/7. Doesn't work well. Just take German 6 to cadential 6/4, and then take your cadential 6/4 to 5 or 5/7. Okay. All right. Does anyone have any questions before we start the break here? The assignment for Monday. It's not. I don't know if it's the hardest part writing assignment that I've ever given you, but it's kind of a doozy. I'm asking you to part write the passage which is on page 230, letter G in the workbook. And the only reason I'm saying that, I just want you to have a little bit of respect for it is because there are several secondary chords in this passage. Maybe secondary dominant, secondary leading tone chords. There are also augmented sixth chords in this passage now. But we should know how to part write all of that. So please take care, do your best to pay attention to the details. And I'm just asking you to do the part writing for this one passage from Romans. That's on page 230 in your workbook at the top. So we'll stop there. And hopefully you guys will have a good weekend. It's gonna be cold, I hear, but nothing new to Nebraska people, right? Just another day.
I'm very distraught. He's like, I put it in there, I had the water, and the water was on the top of the I don't know why I have a water piano
Is it? Okay.
So
Yeah.
that makes us sound like
Yeah, it's kind of nice when it just goes down by now and stuff. And then if you don't fall, like if you go, the seventh just goes down and other stuff, it gets it really nice. Kind of an
I call ramen soup. Oh, I don't know. I don't like ramen.
That's like really,
But it does sound a little, yeah, it does sound a little jazzy.
Oh, my old chopsticks.
Yeah, that's cool.
sounds good.
Yeah.
Where are we going? I'm from this room. This room. You sure? I don't know. There's something weird in their coffee that just makes it taste interesting. Is it the milk? The milk should be the same as everything else. I
Sorry, I'm 15 minutes ago, but I have another short
So
one.
bring my milks.
So I have
Can I go down?
most of the correct questions.
Yeah, well, we actually took a quiz in class,
Okay.
so you'll end up having to do that on campus.
Okay.
So I'm gonna miss overnight.
And I've actually got to go to a meeting right now, but if you, like, I don't know if you have time later this
I got the
afternoon,
results I want.
I'd be happy, if I'm in my office, I'd be happy to
Yeah.
answer your questions.
Okay, absolutely, that's a good one.
Yeah, it's just that I've got something in
Didn't know that.
about 5 minutes.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I got you. Thank you.
Okay, yep.